Welcome to the What Really Happened radio show. Because World War III is a really bad idea.
Excuse me.
Here is your host, Michael Rivero.
And aloha, America. Welcome to our show today on Friday. Sorry for that rude noise. I didn't realize the master game was up here. It's Friday, August 14th, 2015. We have lots and lots and lots of stuff to talk about. And the phone lines are open, 877-300-7645, 877-300-7645. Tom is sitting in our control room, twiddling the dials, keeping us out of trouble, and ready to answer the phone when you call on in. We're going to start today's news going back to Ukraine, because while this is not getting a lot of coverage in the American corporate media, it is clear that the conflict in Ukraine is ramping up to the point where it's a full-on war. There's no question. Kiev is once again being accused of shelling residential areas in their onslaught into Lugansk and Donetsk. And what's really interesting, Kiev has been forced to admit that some 8,000 of their troops have gone over to Donetsk and Lugansk during this conflict. 8,000, that's a sizable force. We may presume that they took some of their weapons with them. Now, the former Prime Minister of Ukraine is charging Poroshenko, or accusing Poroshenko, of running a campaign to have his opposition eliminated, to put it politely. And there have been quite a few Kiev politicians opposed to Poroshenko who have met with accidents of late. In global politics, there's no such thing as a coincidence. Now, John Kerry is admitting that America's European serfs are sick and tired of the Russian sanctions. They have caused tremendous harm to companies all over Europe. They've caused harm to companies here in the U.S. And of course, the attitude of the war hawks is no price is too great for other people to pay for me to accomplish what the voices in my head tell me that we have to accomplish. But it has been a huge hit on Europe. French pig farmers have lost over €1 billion due to the embargo. There is a dairy product crisis all across Europe because they were getting their butter and milk and cream and cheese from Russia. And a lot of businesses are just barely staying afloat. Businesses that before the sanctions were doing good business. They were profitable. They were supporting their economy and their community. And now they're just barely hanging on. At the time these Russian sanctions were imposed, there were 6,000 businesses in Germany doing business with Russia. And many of those have now been driven out of business for this political agenda. And I'm sure ordinary people on the street really don't identify strongly with the political agenda about why America has to make stink face at Russia. All they care about is when their businesses begin to suffer and they have to let people go, possibly even shut their business down and fire everybody. That is going to be right in front of them, that they see with their own eyes. Now, as you know, AIPAC funded a huge trip for members of Congress to go to Israel, and earlier in the week, Netanyahu was out there saying, I'm not going to tell you how to vote on the Iran deal. The implied threat being that if these members of Congress guess the wrong way, they will not be getting any money from AIPAC for their re-election campaigns next year. And I don't think it should make a difference. I think every one of those members of the House of Representatives who are in Israel right now need to be voted out November 2016. No government can serve two masters, and I am sick and tired of a Washington, D.C. that is clearly a puppet ruler on behalf of Tel Aviv. But anyway, there's this interesting little article that came out of Al Monitor, basically saying that all of these members of Congress in Israel, it's just nonstop propaganda about the bad Iran deal. Iran is evil. Iran is doing this. Iran is tap dancing barefoot on shag carpeting. Iran is stealing socks out of your dryers. And the deal is, to prevent Iran from building nuclear weapons will absolutely guarantee that the deal to keep Iran from building nuclear weapons will guarantee that Iran will get nuclear weapons. That's how Orwell it is getting. But it's just a full court press, and more people are beginning to understand this has become an issue of ego and vanity for Netanyahu. That he absolutely is not going to accept the fact that he is not calling the shots in Washington, D.C. And they're bringing up all their assets. The ADL is now out there lobbying Congress against the Iran nuclear deal. They're out to prove they're in control of the U.S. government. And here's the part they're not seeing. They're going to succeed. They're going to prove to the people of the United States of America that the U.S. government works for a foreign power. And that has to have repercussions. Americans are suffering right now. They're going hungry. They're working for lower wages and salaries. And by the way, did you hear only yesterday where the IRS was saying tax collections have hit an all-time high? Well, if you're getting record tax revenues at a time when the median wage and salary has been in serious decline, it doesn't mean the economy is improving. It just means they're finding more ways to take money away from you. And I wouldn't be bandying that all over the corporate media as if it's something to be proud of. Now, over in the House, Congressman Hastings is saying he's not only going to vote against the Iran deal, he will introduce a war authorization against Iran. We have to go to war against Iran because that's what Israel wants. And so, Hastings, here's your rifle, and here's your parachute, and here's your day-glow orange jumpsuit left over from the CIA torture centers. We'll call Tehran and tell them you are on your way to kick their butts all by yourself. But you can see the pairing going on here. When the Iran deal is killed in the U.S., Netanyahu is going to stand up and say, well, obviously diplomacy has failed, therefore war is now the only remaining option. We tried our best. But nobody's fooled by this. Everybody sees Israel is trying to derail the deal in order to commit American sons and American daughters to a war on Iran. That's what they're trying to do. And a lot of people, even inside Netanyahu's own government, are expressing concern that he has gone so over the top to prove that he is in charge of the U.S. government that everybody sees that. And that is going to trigger a backflash against Israel's government, against everybody in our government who's out there screaming, I'm a friend of Israel. All these dual loyalists. And remember, it came out the other day that Netanyahu absolutely believes that Jews living in the United States of America owe their loyalty to him over and above the United States of America. There's a word for that. It's called subversion. Remember when we were kids and we were being warned about communist subversion of the U.S. government? And it turns out we were being subverted. We were just all tricked into looking in the wrong direction. We were watching the commies. And it was Israel that has subverted the U.S. government. Now, surprisingly, Al Franken has come out in favor of the Iran deal, saying that without that deal, Israel will be under threat eventually, because Iran is going to create a bomb. Now, Franken is buying into this idea that Iran is this warmongering power, which we know history does not support. Iran has not launched a war of aggression against another country in over 200 years. The reason Iran is on the U.S. government's special high-interest targets list is for kicking out their U.S. puppet ruler back in 1979, selling their oil for currencies other than the dollar, and just in general refusing to do what they're being told to do by Washington, D.C. on behalf of Israel. And that's what's really going on over there. But good for Al that he's out there in support of this Iran deal. All right, we're going to be taking a break for commercials. We'll be back after these few words. Hello, hi, America. Welcome back to the show here. And even though Israel is going to order the United States Congress to kill the Iran deal, all they're going to accomplish, along with exposing to every American citizen that the U.S. federal government works for a foreign government, foreign power, Netanyahu, is all they can do is pull the U.S. out of the deal. All the other countries who've come to an agreement with Iran, they're moving forward. They're already over there in Tehran making deals for petroleum products and new markets, and business is booming over there. And representatives of American companies can't go because they don't know what's going to happen with the Congress. And even if the Iran deal goes through, by the time they show up in Tehran, all the deals are going to be gone. The Iranians are going to be saying, we wanted to do business with you American companies. You weren't here, so we signed with all these other people. Switzerland has already canceled part of their sanctions against Iran. And they're out there saying that, we'll renew them if Iran doesn't comply, but they're just saying that for political reasons. Switzerland is ready to let all of this Iranian nuclear bomb nonsense go away and get back to business. Peace through commerce, rather than peace through killing the other people here. We're going to grab ourselves a phone call. Jay in Maryland, aloha, welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, aloha, Mike. You have a wonderful show.
Thank you.
I have just a couple questions for you here. I was wondering, what do you think is the best piece of evidence to use against the global warming alarmists? What's the best science to throw back at them, you think?
I've got a whole article, and it's permanently linked to the top of my page. It's ClimateGate, and there's a huge volume of information in there. The science doesn't hold up. First of all, the idea that climate isn't supposed to change on Earth is ridiculous. Certainly the contrary is shown in the geologic and paleontological records here on Earth. The idea that human activity dominates climate on Earth and solar output and the changing shape of the Earth's orbit have nothing to do with it is complete and utter nonsense. Some of the stuff the carbonazis are claiming, like, well, the Earth has gotten warmer, but the heat is hiding in the bottom of the ocean, betrays a complete ignorance of science. In this particular case, the principles of convection. And of course, let's go back to March 20, 2000, when the UK Independent ran the banner story, snowfalls are now a thing of the past, and we have had several record-setting winters since then, and we're going into another one, because the Greenland melt season has ended a month early, and that is a red flag. We've got another brutal winter coming. Solar output is at a record low, 100-year low, and we're going into a new Maunder minimum and a new little ice age. And still the carbonazis want to tax you for your carbon. And Obama's policy change on carbon a week ago is already driving coal companies out of business. People are losing jobs over all this political nonsense. And if there was a real crisis... Let me finish. If there was a real crisis we're dealing with, yeah, some sacrifices necessary, but this whole global warming thing was made up out of thin air so that Al Gore and his people could make fortunes buying and selling carbon credits, and governments could try and stay ahead of private central banking debt with more carbon taxes and more fees and everything. And so it's a lot of pain and suffering inflicted for no real reason whatsoever other than greed.
I appreciate that. I'll take a look at your site a little bit some more on that. My next question was about technology. As I've seen websites like Yahoo, every once in a while an article will pop up saying, if you know such and such coding skill or such and such computer skill, you can make $1 gazillion a year. And then a few days later, there'll be an article about outsourcing. So I don't know what the real truth is about technology.
Well, most of the ads that pop up saying if you have some computer skills, they're usually selling some kind of additional training that they say will position you for the job. But there is a lot of outsourcing. Now, in the realm of IT and software, because of the internet, programmers can work pretty much from anywhere they want to if they want to work freelance. Large companies like to have the programmers come into their office because that gives the mid-level managers the appearance that they're doing something important. But for the freelance world, you can work anywhere on the planet for anybody on the planet as long as there's not one of these stupid sanctions or embargoes in place.
Okay. And the last point I wanted to bring up was political correctness, because I emailed you the article about the POW flag, which really irritated me.
Oh, me too. That made me furious.
I was heartened by the comments at the end, which encouraged the writer to do something anatomically impossible. But I think
No. Don't tell him it's anatomically impossible. That might discourage him from trying.
Sorry, my mistake. But I think a solution to some of this political correctness, I think, would be take these people, strap them to a chair, and force them to watch Blazing Saddles repeatedly. I That would do the trick.
Well, you know, what political correctness really is the thought police. It's just got a new name and a new branding, but that's what it is. You're not allowed to think certain things. You're not allowed to say certain things. You're not allowed to come to your own conclusions and interpretations of what's going on. You know, if you're going to be politically correct, you will accept the doctrinally, you know, indicated, suggested, mandated view of the world. And, you know, my favorite quotes from Donald Trump is, I don't have time to waste being politically correct. And neither does the country. And he's absolutely right. We are falling into the same trap as the former Soviet Union, where politics dominate everything to the point of complete social paralysis.
Yeah, it's pretty sad.
Yeah, well, I'm proud to be politically incorrect.
Me too.
Good for you.
I got to get out of here. My best to you and Claire.
All right, thanks an awful lot for the phone call. We're going to let you go here. Now, getting on back to the war zones, U.S. airstrikes kill hundreds of civilians in Syria and Iraq. And this is an article that came out of the Daily Coin, and it's talking about these ongoing revelations that U.S. airstrikes in Syria and Iraq are not, in fact, targeting ISIS. They're blowing up civilian infrastructure. America is acting as ISIS de facto air force. Actually, they're working in partnership, the U.S. and ISIS, to give the U.S. an excuse to go in and punish the Iraqi people for trying to kick out their U.S. puppet ruler, to punish the Syrian people for not agreeing to a U.S. puppet ruler. It's the same exact thing they're doing in Yemen and Libya right now, trying to do in Iran. And by the way, our wonderful airstrikes in Syria, blew up another, no, this is in Iraq, blew up another maternity hospital. Good, targeting people, blowing up maternity hospitals. This is punishing the people of Iraq collectively for refusing U.S. puppet rule. That's all this is. That's why we're into this third invasion of Iraq. Got to take a break for commercials, and we'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. Now, the other day we were talking about this revelation from the former head of the Defense Intelligence Agency, saying that the Obama administration supported ISIS, supplied them, equipped them, funded them, built them up intentionally. They weren't caught by surprise by the meteoric rise of ISIS. The meteoric rise of ISIS is Obama administration policy. And we have been pointing this out for quite some time. ISIS is the new version of Al-Qaeda. They couldn't use Al-Qaeda anymore because too many people had found out that Al-Qaeda was a front for U.S. covert activity. And the biggest giveaway is the name Al-Qaeda, which literally translates as the base, but in Arabic slang, it means a toilet. And Araish Al-Qaeda means I'm going to the bathroom. And if you're supposed to be this big terrorist group terrorizing the great state in the United States, you don't start by introducing yourself as a toilet. Because then everybody starts laughing, and we have to get Jeff Dunham to bring Ahmed, the dead terrorist, over here to say, "Silence, I kill you." So they rebranded. It's now ISIS, and they get Rita Katz and Site Intelligence Group to gin up all these movies of ISIS, you know, tearing tags off the couch cushions and passing gas in the elevators and waving the Confederate flag and running lemonade stands without permits to create this enemy. And it's right out of George Orwell's 1984, where the government created the arch villain, enemy, Emmanuel Goldstein, to have somebody to blame all the bad things on. Somebody, a villain that they could use to justify perpetual warfare. Somebody for the public to scream their 2-minute hate at, so they didn't turn around and start screaming their hate at the government. 1984 was supposed to be a warning, not an instruction manual. Unfortunately, a little bit of irony there. Anyway, getting on back to Syria, there's an interesting development going on, not getting a lot of coverage in the American media. Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov of Russia has declared it as unacceptable for the status quo to continue in Syria. Something has to change. Now, amazingly enough, Russian diplomats have been in meetings with the Syrian opposition, not the crafted by the U.S. interim government ready to step in when Assad is gone, but the real, genuine political opposition in Syria that were basically exploited by the U.S. to try and change the government there, much as legitimate opposition in Ukraine was exploited by the U.S. to drive Ukraine's government into exile and put in the junta. And they're having discussions between Russia and the Syrian opposition, and they're talking about suggesting to Assad a coalition government with all parties represented. And Assad is probably going to be very receptive to that because they don't have a demand that he must go. Only the United States is out there saying, Assad must go, Assad must go. Our person must be in there. And so once again, we see Russia and Vladimir Putin acting as the global statesman, trying to find a truly peaceful solution in Syria. And that, of course, is why it's not getting any coverage in the American media. Putin is looking really, really good. Obama is looking bad. Actually, the whole U.S. government's looking bad. And they don't want to look bad. And they're not going to change their behavior. All they can do is try and block out news reports of people who are doing the job of global geopolitics better than the U.S. government is. Now, down in Israel, they're throwing yet another tantrum because boycott, divestment, sanction is spreading across the world. The European Union is talking about a boycott. World opinion has turned away from Israel, and Israel has responded by throwing another one of their little petty tantrums. And an Israeli water firm, Mikorot, apparently just shut off the water to some of the areas in the northern West Bank. And this is north of Nablus. The Palestinian Authority is trying to contact them saying, why did you shut off the water? And Mikorot is just not returning the phone call. It's our water, our valves, our pipes. We just decided we're going to shut them off. Nothing for you to do about it. If you don't like it, leave and go someplace else. And right there, along with yet another reminder of the mindset of the government of Israel, is an illustration of why you should never allow yourself to be forced into dependence on a large corporation for any of life's necessities. Because large corporations can get very nasty, especially when they're encouraged to be nasty by the government. It's another reason for people to start being off the grid, providing their own water, their own food, their own medicines. That's what independence means. Now, Jimmy Carter, who we know has acknowledged that his cancer has returned and he's having to modify his very, very busy schedule at the Carter Center to undergo treatment, and we all wish him well. I think Jimmy Carter is the only living American president I would actually want to meet and shake his hand. But he came out with a statement recently saying that the two-state solution for Israel and Palestine is dead, and it's all because of Israel. Israel never wanted the two-state solution. They want it all. And that has really been at the core of all of this unhappiness in that part of the world for the last 60 years. Israel's attitude has been, everyone must recognize our right to exist, but we don't have to recognize anybody else's right to exist. It's that double standard and hypocrisy. If Israel would simply grant to Palestine that which Israel demands for itself, recognition of a right to exist, all this bloodshed and bombing and little babies with back of head blown out could have been avoided. But Israel's leadership really has just been listening to their ego and the voices in their head that they think are coming from the imaginary playmate in the sky. By the way, a little reminder, just about a year ago, the Hollywood studios blacklisted Penelope Cruz and her husband, Javier Bardem, over a letter they wrote talking about Israel's genocide of the Palestinian people. And that's a legitimate observation to make. But it's just a reminder. Penelope Cruz had her career vanish. Believe me, I empathize. And it is a reminder that the entertainment industry, just like the U.S. Congress, is serving a foreign power. Of course, their influence is definitely waning. Look at the box office for last weekend's Fantastic Four remake of a remake of a remake of a redo of a sequel. $26 million? That's a bomb. But I'm sure they're going to blame the content pirates because no studio executive ever admits that they goofed and made a mistake. Alrighty. Up in Canada, more of the same thing. Nova Scotian Morgan Wheeldon, an NDP candidate, was forced to step down when a conservative troll found a statement on his Facebook page from 2014 calling Israel's attack on Gaza a year ago a war crime. Which it was. But because it's a comment against Israel, he will be drummed out of Canadian politics here. And reminder to our Canadian listeners, I did warn you not to let Israel get their fangs into your government, but you didn't listen to me. And here's the result. The Canadian government will expel anybody who honestly assesses the situation in Israel and Palestine. Oh, no, you have to love Israel before you're allowed to be in the Canadian or U.S. governments. So, yeah, your national government is also a puppet ruler on behalf of a foreign power. I don't think you'll like it. We don't like it. All these other people around the world don't like it. So, deal with it. We'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. Now, a few days ago, there was a little bit of an alarm, if you will, raised in the state of Maine. People were looking at aircraft flying overhead and reported Jordanian fighter jets. Well, it turns out it wasn't a hoax. The Jordanian fighter jets have come across here to take part in exercises in the western United States with U.S. forces out there, red flag or Top Gun, who knows what's going on out there. But it was rather interesting to see this article in the Jerusalem Post bragging about how Israeli fuel tankers escorted the Jordanian fighter jets across to the United States of America. And that may have been a little bit of a reckless thing for them to say because they aren't really Israeli tanker planes. You all paid for them. They just get to paint Israeli markings on them. Seeing another article in Russia Today about the absolute abysmal capabilities of the F-35. It's not only inferior to contemporary aircraft that it might actually have to go into combat against, but analysts are saying it's inferior to older aircraft. We know it got beat by a 1970s warplane in war games. Russia is saying the F-35 couldn't even beat the Sukhoi 27 or the MiG-29. It's too fragile, it's too slow, it's underpowered, it's too heavy. It's loaded up with a bunch of high-tech junk that still cannot be made to work. Now, this gets us over to another story in Russia Insider. And they're quoting an article from the Daily Beast. And they're reporting on a series of military exercises carried out over the last few months. It's all highly classified. But the conclusion, the results have been leaking out. And according to U.S. defense experts, our military is not capable of a prolonged fight with Russia. They're going to collapse. And that's something I've been saying for many months now. The U.S. is really good at going on in and slapping around conquered provinces who refuse to stay conquered. But against a military peer like Russia and China, they're not going to be able to prevail in a conventional war against those nations. And now we have these defense officials saying we can't even survive. And that means if we allow this government to provoke a war, a real war, with Russia and China, it is inevitable that sometime between the start of that war and final surrender by Washington, D.C., they will resort to the nuclear arsenal. They'll feel they don't really have any choice. That's what we're all risking. And again, all these money junkies, they've got their bunkers. If this gets out of control, they're going to say, oh, well, we messed it up. We wanted a new Cold War and it went hot. Oh, gee, what are we going to do? Go down into our bunkers, wait a year, come on back up. The planet will be ours. All those useless eaters will have died of radiation sickness. The world will look beautiful without any humans on it. Except, of course, those with a lot of money. And there's an article that a member posted to WhatReallyHappened.com today recounting one of the occasions where we almost went to nuclear war with Russia. We're not talking about the Cuban Missile Crisis. We're talking about failures in the control systems that presented a false picture and almost started nuclear wars. And it's happened quite a few times. In fact, if you remember the Matthew Broderick movie War Games, that was actually based on a real story. Now, the real story did not involve somebody hacking in from outside to play a game, but there was a battle simulation being played on the control systems, and nobody mentioned it was a battle simulation. And so all of a sudden, all these Russian missiles showed up on the screens and almost triggered a nuclear war. And John Badham got wind of that, and that's what led to his script for War Games. Now, Polish EP member Janusz Ryszard Korwin-Mikke, I think I actually got that right, is repeating what the French delegation recently did. They're visiting Crimea. He's going to go down to Crimea and says, it's time for more trade. All of this saber-rattling stuff, it looks good and made all these warmongers happy, but enough is enough is enough. It's time to start going back to doing business. Peace through commerce, peace through trade. Of course, the money junkies don't like that. Money junkies don't want to trade anything. They want the wealth to come to them, and they don't have to give anything back except some ink and paper or type into a computer. That's their idea of a functioning economy. All wealth flows to them, nothing left for anybody else. Which brings us down to Greece. Their parliament, after a huge amount of debate, finally voted through this latest bailout agreement where they're basically selling out Greece to the money junkies in exchange for just enough money to pay the current payment due the money junkies. They're way past living off their credit cards. And as a result of this, Alexis Tsipras is losing support within his own party. They're talking about snap elections. Tsipras is going to call for a vote of confidence in his government, and he will not survive it. His party thinks he betrayed them. The Greek people think the entire party betrayed them. It's not going to end well for anyone. Apparently down in Australia, the Commonwealth Bank had a little bit of a glitch where since August 7th, accounts were being double billed for certain fees and transactions, and as a result, people's ATM accounts started running out. Couldn't get money for the businesses. The Commonwealth Bank is promising they're going to fix it as soon as they can, but as of last report, they were still having issues down there. Deutsche Bank is in the news yet again. Some of their employees are charged with fraud in the carbon market trades. Surprise, surprise, surprise. The whole carbon market is a fraud. Remember when Al Gore set up this whole idea for carbon trading? He was assisted by Enron's Ken Lay. So what Ken Lay and Al Gore planned to do to planet Earth with carbon dioxide was based on what Enron had done to California with electricity. It was a scam right from the beginning. So, of course, anytime you start looking at these transactions, yeah, there's fraud. The whole thing is a fraud, including the claim that humans are warming planet Earth. Fraud, 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 fraud. How much do you have to be lied to before you start getting angry at the arrogance of these people who lie into your face and try and tell you that if you suspect you're being lied to, that you're un-American, or you're a conspiracy wacko, or you're an anti-Semite, or any of these other labels they use to try and shame you into silence, except it doesn't work anymore, because they've played that card too often. They've worn it out. We're not going to be shamed into silence anymore. We know we are right. We know we are being lied to. We know we are being defrauded. By the way, the banks that were caught up in that rate rigging scandal have agreed to a $2 billion settlement. Goldman Sachs, Bank of America, Citi, Barclays, BNP Paribas, HSBC, JP Morgan, RBS, and UBS. Now, they made trillions of dollars off the fraud, and they're going to have to give $2 billion of it back. Cost of doing business. Okay, I thought we had a call, but I guess we don't. China's central bank buys 600,000 ounces of gold in July. If they keep up that rate of purchases, it's going to come out to about 225 tons per year. Gold and silver prices got hammered again somehow, driving them down, and yet all these financial insiders, they're buying physical gold as fast as they can. That's probably the reason they're hammering the prices down. They want to pick it up as cheap as they can. They don't want to pay full fair market value for what they buy. That's for you to do. You serfs, you plebes, you have to pay full market value. We're privileged, elite, rich people. We get discounts, even if we have to make them and defraud them into existence. Out in California, Boston Scientific is shutting down 2 of their facilities, moving their operations to Costa Rica. Loss of 455 U.S. high-paying jobs. Chicago public schools have announced more layoffs. Hundreds of teachers claiming it's spending and pension cuts. Oh, it's the fault of those pension people there. A total of 1,400 layoffs in the Chicago school district. We're going to take a break for our top of the hour news. We'll be back with more of our news and phone calls after these videos. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show, hour number 2. And apparently we're having some technical issues with BAM user. I'm trying to figure out what's going on, if it's at my end or at their end. But we'll just keep working on these things as much as we possibly can here. Okay, getting on back to the news. First of all, the phone lines are open, 877-300-7645. Continuing on with the economy, Advance Auto Parts has announced they're closing 50 of their stores. Okay. As our economic crisis proceeds, and I'm sure the corporate media is going to say, there's no economic crisis. We're in the middle of a recovery. We don't understand why there are so many people showing up at the food banks. They shouldn't be there. The economy is wonderful. Look at the stock market numbers. That's all you need to look at. Anyway. Student loan delinquencies are jumping. That's another little bit of a bubble that everybody is dealing with. And again, Wall Street loves bubbles. They'll get a bubble going, whether it's mortgage-backed securities or real estate or student loans or whatever, and they'll ride it to the top, then they'll bail out at the top, the bubble explodes, and everybody else gets to pay the losses. Why start a business and sell products, when you can become rich just by gaming the market? That's the American way of life. Okay, still trying to deal with BAM user. All right, getting back to the news here. See, I don't have an engineer out here on Oahu. I'm talking and jiggling wires and hitting buttons all the time. All right, let's talk about Hillary's email scandal, because that is really exploding good. And we're now seeing a report that Hillary Clinton's 2 closest associates, Huma Abedin and Cheryl Mills, are going to agree not to delete any emails or documents based on an order from a federal judge that they preserve all their records. This is significant because only a few days ago, Cheryl Mills had announced she was going to destroy all the records she had on the advice of her attorney. So now there's been a reversal there. And I'm sure Hillary is going to be trying to figure out some way she can dump this whole mess on one of these 2 ladies to try and save herself. But it's getting really out of control over there. Now they're reporting that classified information was on Hillary's account even earlier than originally thought. More and more of it's coming out. Now that they know that classified emails have the classification stripped on her server, they're taking a closer look at the content, and they're finding more and more classified information on her unsecured server. And it's getting a little bit darker out there because the company that maintained Hillary's secret server was sued for illegally accessing a database and stealing White House military advisors' phone numbers. And apparently they weren't just getting the numbers, they apparently grabbed the phone lines themselves. 390 phone lines in a move that created chaos across the U.S. government. Well, why are they grabbing the physical phone lines? And the only thing I can think of is they were mounting a massive phone tapping operation, and somebody made a mistake where they didn't just tap into the line, but they basically commandeered it. And if anybody can think of another reason for an internet service provider to be commandeering telephone lines, feel free to send it on in. But it looks like not only was Hillary's server wide open to espionage, it was being run by a company that may have been engaging in espionage. Remember, just before 9/11 happened, and Fox News came out with a story about how Israeli intelligence agents had backdoors into some of our important communication infrastructure, including the text messaging systems, and that they were using the information they were getting from police text messaging systems to warn Israeli-linked drug dealers of impending drug raids so that they could basically go away and not get arrested. This looks like more of the same. And here is where it gets really colorful. One of Hillary's emails shows her trying to borrow a book which included a chapter covering emails that can land you in jail and how to delete something so it stays deleted. Now, the ISP is saying that they're aware that the hard drives on the server have, in fact, been overwritten and blanked. They're confident that the FBI and the Department of Justice are not going to find anything incriminating there whatsoever. Huzzah, huzzah, deal with it. But Trey Gowdy made a comment on MSNBC that is absolutely valid. You and I will delete emails just because they're taking up room, but we don't go through the extra steps of making sure it is physically erased from the drive. The fact that they did that indicates a desire to cover things up that goes beyond merely deleting the information. It's the perception of the cover-up that's going to destroy her. And it gets even more interesting. The ISP that was running Hillary's email server in her home has admitted all of the email data was migrated to another server in the summer of 2013. Remember that movie, Colossus, the Forbidden Project? There is another system. Or the revelation of Nixon's White House tape recording system. This is that big. It's not getting a lot of attention. But what Platte River Networks has admitted is there is a second server with all of Hillary's email on it. It has not been identified, but it's out there. And Hillary turned over sanitized, laundered emails, overwrote the disk on her server, turned the server over, said, see, I'm cooperating, and now we're finding out there's another copy somewhere. And I think they ought to be taking immediate possession of that flash drive that David Kendall has, although I wouldn't assume that that flash drive is complete. But there's another server out there with all of that information on it. So now they're looking at the content of the emails rather than just searching for whether they had classified tags. And they include discussions about the use of U.S. drone operations and other significant information about communication satellites. And all of it is quite damning, but I want to make a point here. Remember how Kenneth Starr distracted America from the real Whitewater scandal of government-sanctioned drug running by dangling Monica Lewinsky in the stained blue dress in front of us? We forgot all about the gun and drug running out of Mena, Arkansas, and oh, a little sex scandal. Well, that's what all this talk about satellites and drones is about. This is the new blue dress. To draw our attention away from what happened at that consulate in Benghazi, which is the reason Congress demanded Hillary's emails in the first place. They're trying to lay a false trailer. Remember, all of this email stuff is about what happened at that consulate in Benghazi. The gun running from Libya to support Al-Qaeda and ISIS in Syria against Assad, which if Hillary did that on her own is an act of treason. And I'm not expecting Obama to step up and say, yeah, I told her to do it, so she's okay. It's not going to happen. That's what this is all about. Not drones, not satellite data. It's about the gun running through the consulate in Benghazi and how the ambassador and his staff got killed. We'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. Now, there's an important point to put out there. Yes, the classified memos about drones and satellites, I believe to be a distraction from the real issue, which is the gun running from Libya to ISIS and Al-Qaeda in Syria to use against Assad, followed by what I think was a staged attack on the consulate, false flag that got out of control and resulted in the deaths of the ambassador and others. But let us not lose sight of the fact that these classified documents were found on Hillary's server, and all it takes is just one to bring a felony charge against her for mishandling classified data. Now, Hillary may be breathing a bit of a sigh of relief regarding Benghazi, because apparently the author of the Benghazi memos sent to Hillary Clinton has now passed away, we are told, due to long battle with cancer. And by the way, while it is almost impossible to cure or treat cancer, it is alarmingly easy to start it. And the U.S. government has done quite a bit of research on ways to do that. Now, again, back at MSNBC, Donnie Deutsch is saying people are getting tired of Hillary Clinton. And it's reflecting in the polls. She's overshot. She came out, made a big splash early on, acting like the presumed Democratic nominee. She's wearing out her welcome. People are just sick and tired of her. The polls are showing this. She's in trouble. Carl Bernstein is out there saying Hillary's in trouble and she's done it to herself. I'm sure Hillary's out there blaming the vast right-wing conspiracy and, staff that went rogue and that jerk who lives on Oahu and all the rest of it because she can never accept responsibility for what she does wrong. But Bernstein is right. She's self-destructing, hoisting with her own petard. Now, we were talking about the parallel between Hillary Clinton and Petraeus. Now, Petraeus lost his job, was on probation, had to pay a huge fine for the crime of mishandling classified information. And all he did was, in the throes of passion, mention something that was classified to his lover. And that was all it took for him to lose his job. And yet, Hillary is out here with all of this information that was exposed on a server with very weak security and no encryption. Yes, she should lose her job. She should be banned from public life. She should be hauled into court. We can't charge a Clinton or a Bush. They're the royal families. They're above these kinds of things. Now, there's another little article out here talking, this is the original antiwar.com, drawing a parallel between Hillary Clinton and Chelsea Manning. And Manning is in prison for the foreseeable future. They're threatening him/her with solitary confinement for having an expired tube of toothpaste. And the magazine with Caitlyn Jenner on it. That's how badly Manning is being tried. Now, Manning didn't commit any crimes against the American people. Manning blew the whistle on U.S. government wrongdoing, which is protected free speech under the First Amendment. Hillary has committed crimes against the United States of America. If, in fact, she did not have a presidential authorization to be running guns from Libya up to ISIS and Al-Qaeda in Syria, she is guilty of treason in the original definition of that crime, giving aid and comfort to an enemy in time of war. There is a war on terror. ISIS and Al-Qaeda are declared to be the enemies of the United States of America. If she sent them so much as a single hand grenade, she is guilty of treason. Book her, Dano. Apologies to my friends over on the Hawaii Five-0 production. Now, a lot of people are still looking at the way that Fox News went after Donald Trump, basically with a meat axe. Hi, Donald, have you quit beating your wife? Have you quit taking dangerous drugs and the rest of it? By the way, somebody put out this video about Donald Trump's personal 757 campaign aircraft, and it is luxurious. There's no question about it. And they're trying to make him look bad. Well, look, all the wasted money and everything like this. But I want to point out a difference between Donald Trump's 757 and Air Force One. You paid for Air Force One. That's the difference. Keep that in mind. So getting on back to Fox News and their attack on Donald Trump. Megyn Kelly leading the way, and all the scandals and crimes of the other candidates that should have been mentioned and weren't because they were focused on Donald Trump. Looking at Federal Election Commission records, it turns out Fox News is Hillary Clinton's 9th largest donor. They have given more than $3 million to the Clinton Foundation and to her campaign. Fair and balanced? I don't think so. And the Democratic leadership is in a panic. They're realizing that they're riding on the Clintanic. And they're really starting to talk about Biden as their candidate next year. And Biden has already come out and he's made a promise that should he feel compelled to run for the presidency next year, it will be for just one term. And apparently he's got a campaign staff already laying the groundwork in the early primary states. He's going to throw his hat in the ring. And Joe, stay out of small aircraft and out of suburban parks. Just trust me on this one here. Jeb Bush is in trouble because during one of his recent appearances, somebody put him on the spot about the U.S. policy for the use of torture and whether he would basically take us back into compliance with various international treaties the U.S. has signed against the use of torture. And Jeb Bush, just like his father and his brother, just kind of waffled back and forth on the issue and basically wound up saying that, yeah, there are times when we're going to have to torture people to get them to say what we need them to say, which is all torture is good for. Torture does not get actionable intelligence. You ask any intelligence professional, they'll say that. All torture does is get you politically expedient confessions. That's what Stalin used it for. That's what the Nazis used it for. That's what the United States is using it for. But there's an even bigger scandal getting ready to engulf Jeb Bush, and we'll be talking about that when we come back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. And before I get back to Jeb Bush here, I'm looking at the Fox News feed, and they've got Geraldo Rivera there, and they're talking about a statement made by General Odierno that it's time to consider sending troops into Iraq because no progress is being made in the battle against ISIS. That's why ISIS was created, to justify a third U.S. invasion and conquest of Iraq, because those gosh darned Iraqi people refuse to live under U.S. puppet rule. What is wrong with those people that they don't understand how the world works? So the U.S. is getting ready to send your kids back into Iraq for a third time to slap those people around, make sure Iraq's oil is sold only for the U.S. dollar. And I have a message to all those phonies running around saying, I'm ISIS, you schmucks. The fact that you are covertly working for the United States government is not going to keep you safe. When the U.S. sends their troops back into Iraq, they're going to stomp you out because you are an embarrassment. If any of you start talking about who you were really working for, you're going to be an embarrassment. And you don't think a betrayal like that can't happen? Remember the night of the long knives in Nazi Germany? As soon as Hitler had his lock on power, all of his former associates who'd committed the phony terror attacks to get him into power were killed. Think Bill Clinton, when he became president, within the first 6 months of his term in office, his 4 top fundraisers all died under questionable circumstances. It's called cleaning house. You get rid of all those people that did your dirty work because now they're liabilities. They're no longer assets. Live liabilities, well, we can't let them live much longer. Now, getting on back to Jeb Bush. And I want to preface this by reminding everybody that Jeb Bush's daddy used to run the Central Intelligence Agency, was up to his neck in the Iran-Contra gun and drug running scandal. It's the reason he had to step down after 1 term and hand the White House over to his partner in the CIA gun and drug running operation, the governor of Arkansas, Bill Clinton. And the CIA places great store on hereditary families in the intelligence community. Oh, when your father and grandfather were a trusted member of the CIA, that buys you a lot of leverage. So, with this in mind, there's a story that is coming out of Blacklisted News. And it's talking about how a lot of attention is currently being focused on Jeb Bush's term as the Florida governor, which included intervening on behalf of his brother with that whole election debacle against Al Gore, and very strange declarations of state emergency just 2 days before 9/11. But the real scandal is that Jeb Bush has been a banker working for the CIA. And they call it a non-official cover, the knock list. You've heard that term before. Involved in banking in Venezuela, and involved with this Miami-based real estate businessman who was proven to be involved in money laundering. So when the CIA was bringing all this cocaine into the United States of America, and it had to be sold and the money got laundered. And we know the story about the Clinton side of it. Arkansas Development Finance Authority, Whitewater, all of that stuff. But the Bushes were partners on this thing. That's where the Bush and Clinton dynasties overlap in this massive government-sanctioned drug-running operation, selling these drugs to your kids. And that is what is going to come back to haunt Jeb Bush, his CIA employment record. Because people are going to be a lot more alarmed about what he did for them than what he did as governor of Florida. Now, Jesse Ventura is out there, and this is kind of a little light humorous thing. He's accusing Jeb Bush of a Cuban cigar cover-up because apparently Jesse Ventura received a gift from Jeb Bush of a box of Cuban cigars at a time when the embargo was still in place. And those Cuban cigars, they were a real plum, a perk. People who could get them would give them away like, this is a real Cuban cigar, and so forth and so on. And now Ventura is out there saying that, well, Bush supported the embargo, still arguing for its maintenance, and yet he was getting stuff around the embargo back then. And it's not a big deal, other than it reveals much about the character of the man. Because remember, character is how you behave when you don't think anybody's looking. Now, the campaign against Donald Trump is really cranking up, and it has reached the level of utter absurdity. In fact, I think we're into shark jump territory. A Ukrainian website has come out with the claim that Donald Trump is an agent of the Kremlin. he's secretly working for Vladimir Putin. I doubt it. Donald Trump could buy Vladimir Putin 10 times over. But I mean, that's how desperate they're getting. They're on the cusp of madness trying to find some way to derail Donald Trump. And I'm not saying Donald Trump is perfect. But boy, the fact that he is outside that system is what makes him so attractive. Meanwhile, Michelle Bachmann is once again in the news. To the best of my knowledge, she's not planning on running for president or vice president again, but she's out there really weirding people out. You know, the other day she was out there saying that the Iran deal should be a cause of celebration because it proves the end times are here. And as it turns out, she's not just pandering to Christian fanatics. She is one of these people who actually believes that if we'll set the world on fire, Jesus is going to come down and invite us all up to the big house when it's over. And so she's out there. Whatever we do to cause more suffering in the Middle East, that's just going to hasten the end times. And I'm sick and tired of living a sin-free life. Jesus, come take me now. Michelle, after the rapture happens, can I have your car in your house? Now, Bill Kristol is trying to backpedal from a lot of his writings when he was involved with the project for the new American century. But it is coming up to haunt him because everybody understands the current U.S. policy of global domination through force of arms originated with the neocon project for the new American century. And Bill Kristol, his own writings, is saying that government should not be transparent to the people at all. There's already too much transparency. At the same time, the FBI is saying that you, ordinary American people, have no right to privacy and secrets. The government has a right to look at everything that you do. And apparently there's been a new audit report released from the post office where certain material was not redacted in time, revealing just how much your postal mail is being tracked on behalf of the government. No wonder they can't get a package anywhere in a short time anymore. They're too busy writing down, oh, Rivero bought another cable. Whatever. Now, apparently, Judicial Watch has pried loose yet another document from the Internal Revenue Service proving that they were being used to target Obama's political opponents. That was one of the original articles of impeachment against Richard Nixon, and Judicial Watch has got the goods. The IRS is not about collecting revenue. It's about impoverishing the politically incorrect or unfavorable. We'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. And getting on to the subject about immigration, Sheriff Joe Arpaio has mounted a challenge to the Obama administration. He's trying to stop the amnesty for illegal immigrants. And an appeals court has thrown his challenge out, saying that the offer of amnesty cannot be shown to be an inducement for other illegal immigrants to try and get across the border. Okay? This is what the court said. The fact that amnesty is being offered for anybody once they get into this country is not, in the eyes of this appeals court, an enticement for more illegals to come here. We need to start having mandatory drug testing for judges. Or maybe they're Obama appointees, because this last week we have started seeing how judges are just catering to whatever political person appointed them, like the Clinton-appointed judge who threw out Larry Klayman's lawsuit, the RICO racketeering lawsuit regarding the Clinton Foundation. Just throw it out, get on out of my courtroom. Meanwhile, there's a story, this NBC covered this tragedy down in Florida. Gentleman from Belize has committed a brutal murder of 4 people in Florida, including an unborn child. I'm sure Planned Parenthood is going to applaud and ask for the spare parts. But what was really interesting is in the NBC coverage of this murder, which police said was almost unimaginable, the brutality. It isn't until the very end of the 8-paragraph report that they mention the suspect was an illegal immigrant who crossed the Texas border 7 months ago. And he made his way to Florida, where apparently he was living either with or near the people he's now charged with killing. One of the victims is reported to be a relative, and apparently he beat all of his victims to death. One of them was a pregnant 17-year-old girl. So, challenge to Megyn Kelly, tell us why Trump was wrong to say that open borders were bringing criminals into this country. Where is that wrong? Where is that in any way faulty or inaccurate? It's politically incorrect, but that doesn't hold much water any longer. Political correctness is so divorced from the real world right now. I absolutely agree with Donald Trump. We don't have time to waste on that anymore. We don't have the luxury of catering to it anymore. We have to come back and start dealing with reality. And we need real solutions to real problems, not more political correct attempts to distort and warp perception in pursuit of various political agendas. Which brings us on down to Planned Parenthood, because apparently 2 states, Alabama and Louisiana, want to terminate their contracts with Planned Parenthood for very obvious reasons at this point. And the Obama administration is threatening these 2 states, saying that termination of the contract with Planned Parenthood is a violation of federal law. Now, with all the bad press Planned Parenthood is getting, why is Obama even stepping into this? And we know he personally is not running next year, but a lot of Democrats are. And the longer this Planned Parenthood scandal stays in the news, the worse it's going to be for those who support Planned Parenthood. Obama's best strategy would be to just let this go away and let the states cancel and not make a news item out of it. However, one reason for Obama stepping in is reported by Investment Watch blog that says while your tax dollars pour into Planned Parenthood, they turn around and take a huge amount of that tax money they get from you and they put it into the campaigns of Democratic politicians. And that may be the reason that Obama is going to use the threat of federal lawsuits or federal action against states canceling those contracts. Now, there's another big stink coming out of South Carolina. There's a video, or the photos, that show prison guards escorting a female inmate into a Planned Parenthood clinic. The female inmate is crying and distraught. And they're asking, was she coerced or pressured into getting an abortion? Because that's the only reason she could be at Planned Parenthood. South Carolina's prisons have their own internal clinics to take care of normal health issues for the prisoners. So what's going on? Maybe Planned Parenthood is running out of parts. They needed a few more things coming in the door here. Now then, the other day I made this video called A Quick Question. It has attracted a lot of attention, not all of which is good. And what was really interesting is we have seen the view numbers get knocked down. It originally was out there with a huge number, then it got knocked down, now it's back up in the thousands again. And what's really interesting is I set up the page to allow me to moderate comments, because I wanted the comments about, I wish your mother had aborted you, and various threats to remove my manly apparatus not visible under the video. And so I was sent a notification about, moderator, you've got to approve these comments, and I see this flame war going on between 2 individuals. And I go, aha, these two individuals, because I have not approved any of their comments to display on the page, have to be working together. They couldn't see each other's posts unless they were working together. And as of the last time I checked, the little moderator's box on my page has disappeared. Oh, it's a technical problem. You know, the moderation doesn't work for this one video and for you. Now, there was an interesting little article came out from NPR, and they're responding to Ben Carson's allegation that Planned Parenthood may have been started to control the black population because most of its clinics are in black neighborhoods. And Carson made the comment that Margaret Sanger was not particularly enamored with black people. And this article is out there to say, oh, this is nonsense, it's ridiculous, it's completely out of control, Carson's lost his mind on this thing, how dare you say anything terrible about her saintliness Margaret Sanger. And then, of course, you go back and you look at the history, and back in 1926, Margaret Sanger was promoting population control to the Ku Klux Klan. She appeared at one of their rallies. It was followed by more invitations to speak at similar groups. And Margaret Sanger's own words indicate a strong racial bias in terms of who should be under population control and not. And remember, the Nazis' race hygiene program was inspired by the U.S. eugenics program of the 1930s, that the government should decide who reproduces and who doesn't. We've got to keep the undesirables from reproducing. And then, of course, following World War II, the American eugenics movement had to basically go undercover because of that association with Nazi policy. Doesn't seem like they've gone all that far. And the bad news for the Democrats and Planned Parenthood is that the latest studies are showing this scandal about Planned Parenthood is shifting women, Hispanics, and millennials over to the Republican Party. Rosie O'Donnell has waded in with a comment, I'd like to take my period blood and smear it all over pro-life people's faces. So I'm starting to agree with Donald Trump's observation about Rosie O'Donnell at this point. We're going to take a break for our top of the hour news, and we'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. Hour number 3. The phone lines are open, 877-300-7645. I'm looking on Fox News, and there is a spokes drone from the Hillary campaign just going on and on about how she's just clearly, you know, the presumed Democratic candidate, and everybody ought to just accept that and stop all this other nonsense. She's leading in Iowa, and he made this weird statement. The polls are very close in New Hampshire. No, they're not. Bernie Sanders is way ahead in New Hampshire. And Hillary's poll numbers in the swing states are not good at all. Getting back to the New Hampshire polls, Hillary is polling below the top 4 GOP candidates right now. She's in serious trouble. I think this push to sell Hillary as she's going to be the candidate no matter what is in response to very clear indications from Vice President Biden that he may step in. He's already got campaign staffers in the early primary states getting ready to launch a campaign. And now we're hearing rumors on the wind that John Kerry and Al Gore might decide to step in because Hillary is now seen as vulnerable. And so Mr. Ketchup and Mr. Global Warming are going to try and step on in. Or maybe Kerry is going to go on in to take votes away from Biden to try and help Hillary. A lot of game playing going on at this point. But Hillary's campaign is clearly worried. They're continuing to send out these very large documents to their supporters about why there really is nothing at all to this email nonsense. It's all the vast right-wing conspiracy. You know how they love to lie about us Clintons and everything bad about us. It's been a lie from the vast right-wing conspiracy. and it really is absurd. But Hillary's in trouble. And I don't really have a preference for who gets the White House next year, because it's not really going to make that much of a difference anyway, but I absolutely do not want Hillary Clinton anywhere near that White House. And yes, it's personal. Deal with it. Now, over in North Carolina, they have an event that they hold every year, going back for 133 years. If you are from Southern California, I'm sure you've seen the Renaissance Pleasure Fair, various other similar things across the country, Civil War fairs, Mountain Man fairs, all of this kind of connect with your history. So over in North Carolina, they've got the Dixie Classic Fair. It's been held every year in Winston-Salem for the last 133 years, and now there's this liberal out there saying, you've got to change your name because the name Dixie is offensive. What, you have a problem with paper cups? I'm not sure where you're coming from. That'll be next. They're going to tell the Dixie Paper Cup Company, you've got to change your name into something that's politically correct. It really is getting nonsensical at this point, and I'm glad people are digging their heels in on this. We don't do slavery in this country anymore, outside the 1040 form. And the reality is, Dixie, the Confederacy, it's all part of our history. Why are you trying to erase the history? Well, are you trying to erase our sense of national identity so that we're this formless social blob more easily amenable to the New World Order? I think that's what lies behind this attack on all of our symbols. The sculptures, monuments, great. They're desecrating graves. They're trying to erase our history, to erase our national identity. That's what's going on, I'm convinced here. By the way, getting on back to feminists and Planned Parenthood and all the rest of that, there's an interesting story about this man in Pennsylvania who has been in prison for 3 decades for the rape and murder of a 15-year-old girl. Okay? And he's now 63. He's spent his entire life in prison. He's 63-year-old. His name is Louis Fogel. He was convicted for this rape and murder in 1982. He was released because finally somebody was able to get a DNA test done. Why is that so difficult? Well, back in the 1990s, during the militant feminist campaign to scream that all men are rapists and that's all they are, all the rest of that other nonsense, there was an epidemic of false rape allegations and outright hoaxes. And a lot of innocent men got sent to prison. And as more and more of these cases came out, there was one guy named Gary Dotzen was sent to prison for 6 years, and he was only released when his accuser admitted she just made it all up because she didn't want to admit to her parents that she and her boyfriend were having sex. So she's, feminism. We'll just send this completely innocent guy to prison for 6 years. And then she developed a conscience and stopped being a feminist, and the guy got let out. And everybody kept saying, look, we have this DNA technology. Anytime a woman claims she's been raped, let's do a DNA test and see if it's really the guy. And the National Organization of Women mounted a huge campaign saying, don't you dare use DNA tests. The use of a DNA test, it's humiliating and degrading to the woman, and it implies that women might actually lie about something that's important. And that's one of the reasons it's been very hard to get DNA tests for people convicted and imprisoned on rape. Because the women would never lie about that. Down in Ferguson, the attempt to create a new race war is going on. 150 people have been arrested. State of emergency is still in effect. Right now, the U.S. government needs a reason to suspend what's left of the Constitution, declare a national emergency, and a race war would do it. So to all my white brothers and my black brothers and my red brothers and my yellow brothers and my green brothers and my peach, taupe, and mauve brothers. Don't fall for it. Don't get suckered in by all these hired agent provocateurs that are trying to get you to cause all kinds of damage because it's what this government wants right now. All right, we're going to grab ourselves a phone call. Damien in New York. Aloha, Damien. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike. Happy Friday.
Happy Friday to you, too.
Thank you. Thanks. On Ferguson, I've been there, and I've been through Baltimore, and I've been there just recently, and I've been there over the past 10 years. I've been there maybe 3 times. And it's really crazy how, the city is just constantly deteriorating, and it's very weird the way the structure is. I mean, look, there's no jobs there. There's nothing for people. The education is terrible. So opportunities are few and far between. The housing is terrible. Most people turn to, something else for any form of funding.
Just to survive. Just to survive. Yeah, we understand
survival
that.
instinct.
Yeah. Remember that story?
Exactly, survival instinct.
Remember that story we did the other day about how the Forestry Service sent an undercover operative into one of the poorest areas of New Mexico to offer rewards for animals. He was pretending to be a taxidermist, and he targeted the poorest section of the state where people are starving. So, yeah, of course, people went out and started shooting these, animals, and they wound up getting arrested. But in the process, 3 times as many animals were killed as would have been the case had they left well enough alone. Okay, Damien, we have to take a break for commercials, but I'll tell you what, I'm going to put you back on hold. Stay on the line. When we come back from our commercials in 4 minutes, I'll let you finish what you were going to say because I cut you off and I feel really guilty about all that. So we're going to take a break for commercials and we'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here, and we're going to right back to the phones here to Damien in New York, and please finish up what you had to say.
Thanks, Mike. I appreciate that. Just regarding that, the last thing I was going to say was just, like we were saying, it creates this environment where basically you're putting people in a position where they have to do whatever they can to survive. And, the housing is ridiculous in, a large stretch of Baltimore and Ferguson. And, there's areas that are nice. It's just like, other areas, but the areas that are bad are really pretty bad. And, just basically, this environment is created, and then you have the police, and the police become opportunists in a way because they already know the environment is just so that people are going to be doing things that are not legal to survive. So that creates a great opportunity for them to go ahead and arrest people or harass them or seize or whatever. And not necessarily that it's their fault, but the way they're taking advantage of the situation.
Yeah, it's an epiphenomenon of the economic decline here. We've turned into a nation feeding on each other just to get by. Yeah. And it's abstract now, but, we could reach a point where we're literally eating each other. Certainly here in Hawaii, that's a concern. If the economy on the mainland crashes and we can't form any partnerships with some other countries real quick, Hawaii is not able to produce its own food to feed its current population. So that would be a problem. Anyway, listen, Damien, need to let you go. Yep. We're running out of time, and I got a bunch of stuff to cover. Looking at the email box, somebody just sent in a very good point about all of this nonsense of banning the Confederate flag, tearing down Confederate monuments, forcing people to stop using the word Dixie and the rest of it. If we erase all symbols of the Confederacy, we're also erasing the heroism of the Union. If we erase all references to slavery, we're erasing the accomplishments of Abraham Lincoln. It's a good point. It's a good point that I think we need to remember. I think they're erasing our history because it's an attack on our sense of national identity. Who are you? I have no idea. Want to be part of the New World Order? Yeah, might as well. Don't have anything better here. Now, here's a breaking story just coming in. The State Department has just confirmed that Hillary Clinton's close friends and aides, Huma Abedin and Cheryl Mills, had other email accounts they were doing government business on that were unreported up till this point. And the State Department is admitting to the judge that it does not have copies of emails that were sent through these other unreported email accounts. And we're talking email accounts that were not on government servers and were not even on Hillary Clinton's server in her New York home. Now, we know from past experience that people who keep multiple email accounts do so in order to have lines of communication outside review. There was a story not too long ago about these corporate executives who had private email accounts to discuss things going on that they didn't want saved in the corporate archives because they were committing illegal actions. And it looks like the same situation is going on here. And for Huma and Cheryl, wear your Kevlar undies, because Hillary is going to hit the panic button any day now. And when the Clintons hit the panic button, people very close to themselves wind up dead in Fort Marcy Park or crashed all over a mountain in Europe. That's a reality of the Clintons, and you'd better keep that in mind right now. Down in Travis County, Texas, police staged an invasion of a woman's home at 3 o'clock in the morning for a warrantless welfare check. Hi, we're kicking down your door and scaring the bejesus out of you because somebody said we got to check on your welfare. I don't think you need a SWAT team for a welfare check. And at 3 o'clock in the morning, business hours, knock on the door. Are you okay? Fine. Wellness check is done. That's what a wellness check is supposed to be. I'm worried about this person. We haven't heard from them. I want to make sure they're healthy. Just go knock on the door and see if they're there. Not kick it down at 3 o'clock in the morning with a SWAT team. Lady could have died of a heart attack right then and there, at the very least. Now, there's another story coming out of Miami where Miami police were photographed beating a handcuffed suspect in their car, already under control, because he said something the cops did not like, which is his exercise of his First Amendment right to freedom of speech, and apparently the photographer who got the picture got assaulted by the police as well. All of this police violence, it is not a racist issue. They're trying to spin it that way. It is a police brutality issue, and it affects all races of Americans. Now, getting on to science and health issues, the FDA has now approved OxyContin for children as young as 11 years old. Huzzah, huzzah. We need to get these people addicted as young as we possibly can because an addicted customer is a reliable customer. By the way, do you know why OxyContin was invented? Because it's just another form of codeine. It was invented so that you couldn't grind it up and snort it, which drug abusers like to do with regular codeine pills. That's basically it. That's the whole reason for that product here. Now, a lot of people are still talking about how the EPA managed to spill 3 million gallons of mine waste into that Colorado River. It is, at the very least, a horrible, horrible botch-up. The official story from the EPA is that they were evaluating how to clean up the mess in this mine, and they were supposedly removing loose material from the mouth of the cave when the wall of material collapsed and all the water stored behind that wall gushed out. Didn't they know there was water behind there before they started dicking around with it? Even for the U.S. government, this is an insanely stupid thing to have done. Recklessly botched. And there are people out there saying that the EPA actually wanted this to happen to justify a budget increase, to get Superfund money to play. Could very well have been, because these days, a lot of government agencies have been caught staging frauds and hoaxes to protect or enlarge their budgets. Let the budget axe fall on somebody else's department over there. I'm important to the greater scheme of things. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. So we're talking about this disaster where the EPA dumped 3 million gallons of highly toxic waste into the Animas River in Colorado. And what's really interesting is, a week before it happened, there was a letter to the editor published in the Silverton Standard and the minor local newspaper, written by a retired geologist who said the EPA is going to foul the Animas River on purpose in order to secure Superfund money. And we have seen a lot of government agencies that are inept and incompetent. The Minerals Management Service ignored the fact that the manual blowout preventer on the Deepwater Horizon drilling rig was 4 years overdue for mandatory maintenance. You saw how that ended. The Securities and Exchange Commission sat on their butts for 12 years while Bernie made off with the loot, cheated his investors and employees. And you had other people like Harry Markopoulos were coming into the SEC saying this guy is running a Ponzi scheme. And the SEC investigators went over to Madoff's place. They handed him resumes. They wanted in on the party. So this is not a completely out of touch suggestion. Look at how Waco came about. The BATF needed good publicity. They needed to score a victory against evil gun owners over at that church. And that blew up in their faces. Happens all the time. And we're looking at all of the states downstream from that disaster are looking at filing lawsuits. The U.S. government is already saying, no, sovereign immunity. You can't sue the government for an honest mistake. Really, that's all it was. Now, there is an article over at naturalnews.com that we link to, and it goes into detail about how all these government agencies routinely fabricate false flag operations to justify their existence and spending. The FBI, we have seen over the last several years where FBI informants will set up some patsy for a terror arrest so the FBI can get good coverage in the media and an increase in their annual budget. ATF, same thing, again going back to Waco. And it's a pattern of how these government agencies survive budgetary tightening during these times. They have to go out and create a crisis for which they are well equipped to deal with. Remember, we were talking about this Forestry Service. Undercover operative pretending to be a taxidermist goes into the poorest part of New Mexico saying, I need these animals that are banned for hunting and here's what I'm going to pay for them. And these are people who are starving, can't feed their families, can't pay their mortgages. Yeah, they're going to do that. It's entrapment. And they arrested a lot of people and threw them in jail, and it made the Forestry Service look good. And it actually wound up with a lot more of these protected animals being killed than would have otherwise been the case. But as long as it makes the Forestry Service look good, that's all that matters. And right now, the Forestry Service needs all the help they can get because of what's been going on out in California, where Nestle was allowed to just suck water out of California's aquifers, bottle it, and sell it in the supermarket based on a water permit that had expired a quarter of a century ago. And an investigation by the Sun revealed that it was the Forest Service that had not bothered notifying Nestle of the need to renew the permit. And the Forest Service official who let Nestle drain California water is now working for them. Government, thy name is corruption. All right, got a story here coming out of Texas. A family was burned by the explosion of a well on their property contaminated by fracking fluid. And this family is suing several companies running the fracking operations around where they live because their water well exploded from the accumulation of methane and all these other chemicals. Cody Murray is permanently disabled by the explosion. And their attorneys are saying that this was methane gas and other chemicals leaking into their water well from fracking operations run by EOG Resources, Fairway Resources LLC, and 3 other Fairway subsidiaries. And by the way, Fairway Resources GP LLC is a wholly owned subsidiary of Goldman Sachs. There's another study that has come out showing that there is a link between fracking activities and health problems. Researchers from the University of Pennsylvania and Columbus University published this study showing that when you live near fracking wells, you have an increased risk of heart failure, nerve damage, cancer, because of exposure to these chemicals, which are known carcinogens. Remember that fracking fluid they pump down to crack the rocks. It's not just water. It is a chemical sludge, and many of its components are known to be carcinogenic. Some are radioactive. Some of it is toxic industrial waste that can't be disposed of any other way. So their idea is, well, we're going to pump it thousands of feet down in the ground, and it will stay there, trust us. Only it doesn't. The earth is a lot more porous than that. I mean, common sense tells you if they're pumping this dangerous chemical mix down there to fracture the rocks, there are going to be cracks through which this fluid will then seep back out. Now, as I mentioned to the caller earlier, the Greenland melt season has ended a month early. How do they determine the end of the melt season? Well, it's very simple. The melt season is when more Greenland ice melts than reforms. And that has now ended. The total ice volume of Greenland is starting to increase again. And it's a month early. That's a warning sign we're headed into yet another brutal winter. That's why Obama rushed through his global warming carbon, we're going to bash the coal companies here. And it's already having an effect here. Because NBC News is reporting Union Pacific is cutting jobs because the amount of coal being shipped by railroads is plunging. And it's not just the railroads that are cutting jobs because the volume of traffic is going down, but those coal companies are letting people go. Some have shut down completely. All to deal with human-caused global warming, which is a myth. And we already know when, especially if Al Gore steps into the Democratic race, it's going to be nonstop global warming. Pay no attention to that snow and ice. You're just hallucinating, all that frostbite. It really is getting ridiculous. Now then, in the world of computers, Facebook had a student intern working for them, Harvard student. And he spotted how Facebook's Messenger is tracking users, and he identified it as a potential privacy issue. And according to Boston.com, Facebook promptly fired him. You're not supposed to know how we are spying on our users. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here, last segment of our program on this Pauhana Friday. And we're talking about computer issues. And we're talking right now about this Intel chip. And they're now saying basically Intel left a security flaw on its chips for 16 years that allows those who know the flaw is there to plant rootkits on your computer that are almost impossible to detect and almost impossible to remove. Now, the blunder, that's what they're calling it, was introduced in 1995 in the Pentium Pro. And security people called Intel on it all the way back there in 1995. And Intel just has never gotten around to dealing with this thing, which tells us that more than likely this is one of the National Security Agency's mandated back doors, so they can go into your computer and do whatever they want to you whenever they want to do it. Because the NSA doesn't have anything else to do. They certainly can't find the cyber criminals, can't find any real terrorists, couldn't recover Lois Lerner's emails, certainly aren't at the forefront of finding all the missing emails from Hillary and her aides. Kind of hard to see what use the NSA actually has, other than to scare us all into silence. And they're not succeeding at that either. Now, apparently there is a new approach to getting you out of your money on your smartphone. And basically, victims are lured through a complex series of pop-up advertisements to a website that has a hidden payment button that charges a fee. If you click anywhere on the screen, it's as if you click the "Yes, I will send you so much money" button. And they're not charging a huge amount of money, £5. They're hoping that people will just shrug it off and say, oh well, and that will be the end of it. But when you apply it to the total number of cell phones in the entire world, that's some serious money. And this is another cyber criminal the NSA can't seem to find. Or maybe this is all NSA. They have been set up with the world's greatest hacking system at your expense to turn around and plunder you by a desperately bankrupt government trying to keep the balance sheet in the black. Remember, the official website of the United States Treasury Department has not changed the debt amount on that page for going on 4 months. And nobody's going to believe that the government is all of a sudden fiscally responsible. We're getting more and more complaints from people installing Windows 10 that it is a privacy nightmare. That even when you click all the buttons, do not send, do not send, do not send this information, Windows 10 still continues to send everything you do to Microsoft. Concerns are being raised over these personal assistant voice recognition technologies like Siri on the iPhone as to how much information they collect on you. Now, the vast majority of this information is being collected for targeted advertisements, but its potential for misuse is clearly there. And ultimately, I think people who are okay with having their data harvested for marketing purposes, fine, go ahead and do that. But it should be left to us to decide whether or not we will have private lives. Just like it should be left to us over whether we will or will not eat GMO food, just as it should be left to us whether or not we will be vaccinated. But under fascism, you don't get that choice. You will eat your GMO food. You will be vaccinated. You will have your life spied on all the time by a government that doesn't believe you have a right to look at what they are doing. Now, Russian developers have come out with what they claim is an NSA-proof, secure, encrypted phone. And I'm not sure how they would prove it or document it. But again, the reality is we proved at WhatReallyHappened.com. It is very easy to create systems of encryption the NSA cannot defeat. We did it 6 times in a row. And the NSA would be well motivated to have cracked any one of my challenges to discourage other people from learning how to write their own methods of encryption. Because remember, decoding an encrypted message is a 2-step process. First, you have to figure out the method. Only when you have the method can you start finding the key. The Allies were not able to break the German Enigma code until they captured a machine, and that gave them the method. Then Alan Turing was able to build his machine that could brute force the keys. So if you come up with your own method of encryption, the NSA is deaf, dumb, and blind to what you are doing. A couple of little charming stories here. Over in Iowa, there's a barber who's making a little bit of headlines over there. He has got a deal going on where he will give free haircuts to any kids who, while they're getting their hair cut, will read to him. And this is not about him lacking entertainment. This is about encouraging kids to learn to read. That is fundamental. And in this day and age of the electronic media, literacy is actually in decline. We have a good friend that lives here on Oahu, Wally Amos. You probably better remember him as Famous Amos of the chocolate chip cookie fame, except he's not legally allowed to use that name anymore. But he set up this combination cookie bookstore called Chip and Cookie. And people could come in, they could buy the cookies, they could buy the books. If they wanted, they could just sit in the chairs and read the books to their children. Because the goal of this was encouraging family sharing time and literacy. So that you can go out and read all those books that the government would like to ban if we didn't have a First Amendment here. By the way, if you are an astronomer or a ship's navigator, you may be rather shocked to find out that for the last 131 years, the Greenwich Meridian line has been in the wrong place. And it's a tourist attraction. There's this stainless steel bar that runs down longitude 0 at the Royal Observatory. And it turns out it is 334 feet west of where it really should be. Over there at Greenwich Park and not the observatory. Oh golly gee, our blunder. And here's another story about why we really need to be more careful about our Justice Department. There's a man down in a Texas prison. He's 59 years old, Jerry Hartfield. He has been in prison for 35 years without being convicted of a crime. And he was convicted in a 1976 murder charge that originally put him on death row, but the appeals court threw out his conviction. They took him off death row. Gee, that was nice of them to do. But he's been sitting in prison for 35 years because the state of Texas just didn't get around to trying him again. And so next week, he's going to get his new trial after waiting 35 years. The system is broken. There's no question about it. There's the music. Time for me to get out of here and get back to this mix of one of Claire's new pieces of music. And we will be back on Monday here on the Genesis Communication Network. Finally, a big thank you to all of Rivero's Rangers who've been calling these talk radio shows in your neighborhood. They are starting to call us back. Thank you very much. Keep it up. We'll be back Monday. Aloha, America.